The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski, and thank you for attending today's webinar. It's a pleasure to have you join us today, and we look forward to your participation. Today's topic is buyer intelligence, and we believe that this is your key to win your target markets. What we will be talking about and discussing today, I think will have the most profound impact on your business. There are many revenue growth best practices and innovations that we talk about each and every day with our clients. But this one, I think, is the most powerful. It probably is also one of the most overlooked in terms of really understanding your buyer, in eliminating friction, and accelerating the alignment with your buyer. We're going to be walking you through a proprietary process that we have perfected with hundreds of companies over the past 20 years. And what we found when you think about buyer intelligence and engaging with your target audience, one of the things that I look at four key principles in this area. One is there's an art to asking the right questions. As you know, many companies do surveys and conduct surveys, but there's an art to really figuring out what's the important thing to ask and how do you ask it so that you get the proper response. Another thing that's important in this area is statistically relevant information. You need to engage enough decision makers so that the opinions and feedback that you get are really going to be the proper sampling of your target audience and be representative. The third that we'll talk about is as you gather buyer intelligence about your target audience, it's really important to look at correlation analysis to figure out where are the trends, what's important, what are the key takeaways that you should be focusing on. And then finally, this is great information. And what we find with buyer intelligence is that all of our clients, all the executives that we work with, find the insights and the material coming out of these type of buyer intelligence engagement that you have with your target audience to be phenomenal. But the key is translating that insight into actions. So again, thank you for joining us. And throughout today's webinar, I ask you to post your questions. We will make sure that we get to your questions. If we don't have a chance to get through all your questions today, I'll personally follow up with you one-on-one and make sure we address any outstanding questions. So all questions are important. We love your involvement, and we love to conduct a number of polls throughout today's webinar. Today's webinar will also be recorded. So if you want to share this information with other colleagues or other members of your management team, we would highly suggest that it's a great way to provide best practices and share that information. So as always, let's start off with a question here. And let me go ahead and I'll launch this poll. And let's talk a little bit about how do you do this today. So when you think about gathering buyer intelligence, or intelligence about your buyer, if you will, how do you do that today? Some companies are going to be looking at analyzing wins and losses. So a lot of times people get a lot of information from where they won. You also can get information in terms of surveying customers. Another area that happens is engaging analysts and looking at some market intelligence reports. If those are reports that you have, like from Gartner or G2, on your target area. A fourth area is conducting interviews with focus groups. And then finally, the last one is surveying prospects. So go ahead if you could, and let's have everybody's input here, and I'll share the information back with the audience today. So really good information, and I'm always curious to find out how you are getting to your buyer and really understanding their needs, understanding their desires, understanding how do they want to buy from you. Because the more you can do that, the more you can eliminate potential friction that happens in the engagement process. Okay, let me go ahead and close the poll and I'll share the information. Okay, 78% of you stated that you get your information about your buyer intelligence, typically by analyzing wins and losses, which is great. That's great feedback. 22% state that you survey your customers. 44% are leveraging analyst and market intelligence reports that you have in your specific area of expertise or competency. And then 22% state that you conduct interviews with focus groups, and that's fantastic. So great information there. Okay, I'll close that off, and let's go forward. Just as a background, some of you may be new to learning about On-Demand Advisors. Craig Remy and I founded On-Demand Advisors as a revenue acceleration firm 12 years ago. And from my background, I've been a serial CEO for public and private companies in Silicon Valley, many solution and services companies, really focusing on B2B companies. And so really have enjoyed the leadership roles that I've had. Craig has been a serial CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, for public and private companies in Silicon Valley. And before that, he was a branding executive working with some of the largest digital agencies in San Francisco and working with clients like Levi Strauss and Google and Disney and some major names to just name three firms. But really, we bring together some very strategic expertise that we look at in terms of this complete revenue engagement cycle that you have with your prospects, how to accelerate that. And then also we have a complete team broken into functional areas that we have under strategy, marketing, sales, and business development to really help complement the needs of our clients. So again, that's just a form of introduction. One of the things that Craig and I did when we were building a company called Intact. Intact is the software as a service company. And we partnered with Salesforce, and we partnered with 300 different market makers to get to the market. We also built our inside sales team based upon best practices with Salesforce so we could really scale. And so at that time, we were adding about 1,500 new clients per year. So that's quite a few new clients, tremendous growth, and really figuring out how to do this. But what we realized is we needed to create a map, a roadmap, if you will, about how to scale revenue and do that in a demonstrable way. And the map was so well received that many of the venture partners that we worked with asked us, why aren't more and more companies looking at using this map to actually help map their growth? And so after leading companies as both CEO for private and public companies, I thought it would be great if Craig and I could start our own firm, On-Demand Advisors, and really do what we're doing today, which is provide with you, our target audience, these best practices, share with you these innovations, and also looking at being on the cutting edge of finding new ways to actually engage with your target audience. So here's the map, and I'm happy to share the map with any of you. At the end of our presentation, I'll share with you our email and phone numbers, and you're welcome to ping me and let me know that you're interested in getting a copy of the map. So the map here, as you can tell, has 7 different areas. And it really is a great way to think about what you do today in terms of your revenue growth engine that you may or may not have in place. Today, we're going to focus in on just this one area, buyer intelligence. But you'll find in the areas of purple, these are the areas that are around strategic insight and strategic growth. Red is all about marketing best practices. Sales is all about sales best practices. And number 7 over here is about revenue expansion. So in all of our webinars, we do walk through different components on the revenue acceleration map. But like I said, today, it's really about really understanding your buyer, understanding what's important to them, and how to engage them in a very meaningful way. So let's talk from your perspective. What do you think buyer intelligence do you need today? And let me go ahead and launch this poll. And please go ahead and give us your opinion. So when you think about buyer intelligence, do you need to really understand what your buyer wants and needs? Do you want to determine what pains are most important to your buyer? Is it important to prioritize what value propositions are going to be most important with your buyer? Do you want to understand how to best win against your competitors? Or finally, do you want to determine what offers you have that you can offer to your buyers that they are really looking for? So go ahead if you could and participate in our poll. I appreciate that. This is great to share this with everybody on today's webinar. And buyer intelligence, by the way, can mean lots of things to lots of people. But what we find is that when you look at this holistically, you really want to have all this information about your buyer. But of course, this question is focused around prioritization. Okay, so I'll just get the poll open here for a couple more seconds. Make sure that your voice is heard. And again, thank you for participating in the poll. Okay, let me go ahead and close this off, and I'll share the information with everyone. And this is one of those choose all that apply, if you will. So 67% of you stated that understanding your buyer and what they need and want is important. 56% stated that determining which pain points are most important. Another 56% stated it's the value propositions, not just the pains. 78%, the number one, is to understand how to win against competition. And 11% stated that it's determining what offers your buyer wants. So again, thank you for participating in that poll. Okay. So when do you need buyer intelligence? That's really not only do you need it, but when do you need it? And so I'd like to offer up some examples here. And as we go through this, I'm going to walk through some specific client examples as it pertains to when. So one of our clients is a company called AvidXchange. They are a software as a service company providing accounts payable optimization services and solutions and e-payment solutions. And we began working with them, and this AvidXchange was very interesting because they've been focused on, when we began working with them, on one industry for 13 years, this property management companies. And so the questions here, the first two are important when we talk about AvidXchange. So when you're looking at how to prioritize your messages, all of us have lots of different messages. The question is, which ones are most important to your target audience? Which ones do you lead with? The second question is, when you use buyer intelligence is when perhaps your messaging is not resonating with your target audience. So we have found, working with AvidXchange at the beginning, there were both of these issues. We did ask them if they wanted to do a buyer intelligence survey with their target audience, and they said yes. And so we did that with their existing markets that they were focusing on, which is property management companies. We asked those decision makers to rank the importance of their top 20 value propositions. And what was surprising to them, as well as to us, is that the two value propositions that ranked the lowest were the two that they were leading with when we began working with them. So there you go. There was a definite need for us to change the messaging and positioning and offers for AvidXchange so that we could properly engage with their target audience. Another situation where you really need buyer intelligence is when you're thinking about launching a new service or a new solution. Another one of our clients is Premix Wireless, an IoT company providing solutions in a number of different verticals. When we began working with Premix Wireless, they were launching new solutions in the healthcare industry. And one of those new solutions is emergency lighting that you have in hospitals, healthcare systems, clinics, and so forth. And we asked them if they had done any type of work with their buyer to figure out the importance and need and configuration. And they had not. And so we actually worked with them to launch a buyer intelligence engagement and survey with their target audience. And it was really interesting. The information that they got out of that survey really help them think about how do we message and position this new service, emergency lighting, to the healthcare markets and do in such a way so that we're going to get the accretive revenue that we're looking for out of our R&D efforts. And so not only did they find this so insightful, but we went back and did the buyer intelligence engagement for all of their solutions across all of their markets. So it really was seminal in terms of helping them understand how to position their products and services. Let's look at number 4 here. Another time when you need buyer intelligence is really to educate your buyer before your sales team is engaged. So interestingly enough, that the corporate executive board says that 57% of the sales cycle is completed by the time your buyer engages with a salesperson from your company. That means you really have an opportunity to educate and set preference before that engagement happens. So we've seen that across all these companies that we work with, that you really want to do the intelligent education up front. So it makes you more efficient. It also makes your buyer better qualified in terms of engagement. This 5th one's kind of interesting since we've been exiting the pandemic, if you will, here at the end here and tail over the past year. And really what's changed with your buyer. So for instance, if you think about your buyer today, they have changed in many different ways. So for instance, one of our clients is a company called Integrity out of Canada, a great company up there, and they're focusing on a number of different verticals, including oil and gas and chemicals and other asset-intensive industries. And just working together with them, we've seen how more and more of the interaction that we have with their target audience has gone online, because you don't have the same face-to-face engagements as they've had in the past and that perhaps you have. So consequently, it's important to do that. The other thing that we found is that they sell to project teams. They sell to large project teams in the enterprise. And so being able to have a consistent set of messages to engage their buyers across all the different locations and personas was very important for them. Let's look at some other reasons why buyer intelligence can help you. When you need to prove to stakeholders that you know your audience. So if you're thinking about getting investment, if you're thinking about engaging with partners, what they're really looking for is they're looking for proof points that you truly understand your target audience. So these type of buyer engagement surveys and buyer engagement plans will give you that type of statistically relevant information to prove that you truly understand not only your customers and your new sales that are happening, but your target audience rigorously that you're working with. Another area is aligning your management team around what's important to your buyer. One of the interesting things that we found as we've done many of these buyer intelligence surveys is that before we engage with the management team, everybody has an opinion about what the buyer wants and needs. But what we find is when we engage with our clients with this process, we get to what I call the core truth. The core truth is, what does the buyer really think? What do they need? What do they want? And it allows the management team to come together toward a common mission, a common message, a common positioning. Another thing that's important is if you're getting a lot of, as we saw through the earlier poll, if you're getting a lot of your information through wins and loss information that you have with your wins, that you have new clients and so forth, you're going to be like me, which is you're going to be wondering, is this indicative of the total audience, or is this indicative of a certain segment of the audience? Is this an anomaly that you're getting from this information with this win? So what you really need is you need a statistically relevant way to engage your target audience and really engage 50 or 100 decision makers, and being able to say, now that we've been able to do this, how do we extract that information or extrapolate it for the bigger audience? The last thing is, out of these buyer intelligence engagements, is giving you the ability to do the segmentation that's important for you. So for instance, when Craig and I were leading Intact as a software as a service company and scaling that, we sold financial applications um, to all of our target audiences. What we found, though, is that it was important to have one buyer journey for the CFO, another one for the controller, another one for the user, and so forth. And we also had a different one for IT. So every audience that you look at, if you have multiple buyers or influencers in your target audience, we're probably going to need some type of engagement to truly understand what's important to them. So obviously, if I'm the chief financial officer, I have a different set of questions before I get a heart transplant than if I'm an accounting user and I'm figuring out how to look at the navigation, ease of use of the solution. With ICUC, and we'll be talking about them today, they are a global social media management services company. So not software or not a platform, but focused strictly on services, on social media management services. What we found with them, the key with their buyer intelligence surveys that we did with them was they needed to start talking and engaging by industry. So their target audience said, don't tell me about social media best practices in pharma if I'm in CPG. Tell me about what you're doing in CPG that's revolutionary. Another client of ours is a company called eBuilder. eBuilder provides capital management solutions, and they engage firms as well as large engineering firms to use their platform to manage large capital projects. What was interesting as we worked with them through their buyer intelligence survey process that we conducted for them is that there was a natural segmentation that occurred. So small companies that had small capital project requirements were really looking at one set of needs. Mid-stage companies were looking at another set, and then large companies were looking at a totally different set of needs. That allowed us to stratify the messaging, positioning, and marketing that needed to happen so that they could adequately engage those three different audiences. But we would have never understood that unless we had done the buyer intelligence process with them. So I would tell you that today, for all of you attending today's webinar, that you all need buyer intelligence if you want true insight into your target audience. It's something that we've perfected now over the past 20 years. And what you find is you get to segment your audience of decision makers. You want to engage at least 50 or more of those decision makers in your comprehensive survey engagement that you have with them. And the reason why you want 50 is because you want to have a statistically relevant sample. And so that we always do that. So we get at least 50, sometimes we get 100, sometimes we get even more than that involved in these type of surveys. It's important to identify the problems that they have with their existing approach that you're addressing today. It's also important for them to prioritize both your pains that you solve and the value propositions that you provide. And finally, if they were looking for your type of solution, who would they trust? How would they go about looking for that type of solution? What would they do? And what's the process that they would undertake? That's really important because all companies spend a lot of money on marketing. The challenge here is you can waste a lot of money on marketing too. So it's important to find out where to spend the money. Now, all of you that are attending today will receive a copy of our Buyer Intelligence Program Guide. And this will be included in this guide. The top is really gathering the buyer intelligence. It's this rigorous survey that we're going to walk you through an example. And it's really surveying the decision makers in this audience. Out of that becomes the distillation and analysis that happens, the correlation analysis, that becomes what we call the core messaging document. The next thing that you see here is the buyer engagement roadmap. What's great about this is you don't have to sit down anymore and try to figure out what you're going to say next month or next quarter with your audience. You already have a roadmap that you can lay out for the next 12 to 24 months in terms of how to intelligently engage your target audience. Now, buyer intelligence is used a couple of different ways. The output of this information can be used in terms of how you engage with your audience. In other words, for a buyer's guide, what information do they want to understand so that you can help them accelerate their buyer's journey? What information would they find useful in terms of presenting the ROI for the investment for your solution? The other thing that's important is it will change all the messaging that you have on your website. So almost all the websites that we see today, bar none, are focused around, let us tell you what we do. This is our services, this is our solutions, here's who we are, and so forth. That's really great information, but it's starting with the solution, not the problem. So when we think about helping the buyer through the buyer's journey, what you're really trying to do is understand what are the key problems or business challenges that your buyer has, and then connect those problems to your services so that they can truly see the connectivity between what you do today and how you help them address what they're looking for to address in their business. Another area that comes out of the buyer intelligence process and the surveys is your sales playbooks. So when you think about bringing aboard new salespeople or even existing, how do you really help them understand how to have an intelligent conversation with decision makers? This is really the distillation that provides that information from the survey into the messaging and engagement with your target audience. So when you have this, it changes the way you do business, and it allows you to really be in a better position to sell and engage with your buyer. So the steps that we follow in our proprietary buyer intelligence program that we've honed and refined over these many years is really start to, first of all, identify the target audience and the ideal customer profile. So you're starting to look at that and say, what is it that we're looking at? Are we looking at this by industry, by persona, by geography? How are we segmenting our target audiences? And then we're going to construct the 5-part survey guide for each audience. Now, the 5 parts that we walk through are really demographics. Who are we engaging? So we can use that for analysis and correlation analysis. Number 2 is what's the process that they're going through today? So every business, when you decompose the business itself, has a series of different processes, some that may be efficient, some that may be totally inefficient or missing. And so you really want to understand how things are getting done or not done today. The third area of this 5-part process is really understanding the pains or business challenges that you solve and how important are those to your target audience. How do they have a sense of urgency to address those? The fourth area is value propositions. Every company has value propositions that they offer today, either value propositions existing or ones that they want to test. And so this survey process allows you to really test out even future value propositions that you haven't brought to market. But you get a chance to really understand from a buyer's perspective how important those are. And finally, the fifth area is about influencers and marketing, which is, really looking at the watering holes for your buyer, where they would get information, where you need to be so that you can engage with them. So once you engage the 50 or 100 decision makers in this survey process, then it's about really analyzing, prioritizing the takeaways, and building what we call the core messaging document. And we'll walk you through an example of what that looks like. It also then will allow you to change the way you communicate and engage with your target audience on your website, in your sales conversations, and in your roadmap that you have for demand generation programs and prospect engagement. And again, this is just another way to think about this. So you've got your buyer survey, you create the messaging out of this process, and we help companies do that. That's something we're very, very good at doing. And then you create all the different offers that are important to your buyer. So that could be a webinar. It could be success stories. It could be videos, customer testimonials. It could be thought leadership. It could be webinars. There is so much that you can do with this, but now you've got the compass to tell you which way to proceed. So here's the buyer intelligence program. We started off with the buyer intelligence survey. Once we do execute that, it's really looking at the core messaging document. which is a distillation. Then you build the buyer engagement roadmap. You've got your vehicles here, and then it's about content syndication, and it's about really getting the quality and educated leads. One of the things I think is really different with this type of program is that when you really have buyer intelligence and when you create the right information for your target audience, you end up with much, much, much better needs and contacts and buyers in this process because they truly understand what you do. They truly understand your value propositions. They truly understand how you're going to help them. This is really wonderful because when this happens, it accelerates the engagement process with your sales team or with your partner engagement organization because now they're educated. Now you've given them exactly what they're looking for in your engagement. So they don't walk away thinking, gee, I wish I knew what this company does. They walk away saying, wow, I really understand this company and I'm going to make it a priority to engage with this company. Now, I talked earlier that ICUC is one of the companies that is our clients that we've engaged with over a number of years. And I said that they're a professional services company, so they're a global social media management services company. When they initially came to us, they were looking at really amplifying the number of sales leads that they could create for their organization. And instead of 50 or 40 that they were getting on a monthly basis, they wanted to get 250 or more, which we were able to help them do. But one of the things that we found so interesting in this process is we did a horizontal survey of their target audience across many different industries to conduct their first buyer intelligence engagement. And when we did that with them, we found something that was very important in this engagement. What we found is that their target audience, their decision makers, ranked the importance of peers by industry as being one of the most important relevant pieces of information to them. What that allowed us to do when we did this buyer intelligence survey horizontally, it helped us realize that even though they were selling a horizontal solution and service, their audience didn't want to hear about the horizontal solution or service. Their audience wanted to hear, what are you doing in my industry that I can apply to my company? So if I'm Novartis and I'm a pharma company, tell me about what you're doing with other pharma companies. Don't tell me what you're doing with Starbucks or Google. Even though that's great, I really wanted to think about how do I apply social media solutions and services and practices to my industry. So that was really a great opener for us. The other thing that we found is we worked with their company to help them launch and position something called the social customer journey. They're like many companies where they had created a number of different point solutions, point services, if you will, in different areas. And as they added more and more services, it became increasingly difficult for them to sell that set of solutions because instead of having, let's say, 4 or 5, now they had 8 or 9 or 10. And so it became more difficult. So what we found as we surveyed their target audience is their audience was looking for some type of understanding about what services do they need when. And so we created this thing called the social customer journey. And you can see there are different stages here of engagement. So if I'm Starbucks and I'm trying to get discovered with our target audience, I'm going to need certain social media strategies and best practices to get discovered. If I'm over here and I'm trying to grow customer influence, then I'm going to need a different set of services to really increase the influence I have with my customers. So this became great in terms of actually providing the framework that we gathered in terms of market intelligence to really look at this and look at it in a different way. It also gave us an opportunity to really rank and order the value propositions that they have. So let's go ahead and just look at, for example, very at a high level, when we conducted the survey with them for the first survey that we did across the horizontal sphere of markets, we engaged with them. We built out the survey with their management team, focused on the 5 areas we talked about. We engaged with at least 95 people that started the survey, And we completed the survey with 76 people. But as you can see here from this uh, set of slides here, there is a wealth of information that we provided to them. In fact, this deck alone is 100 slides. So there is a tremendous amount of information that came out of the 40 questions that we asked their target audience. And because we asked the same question from all of the responders, we were able to look at analyzing the information, correlation analysis, and gain tremendous information in this process. What we did then next, after understanding that, is we built for them their core messaging document. And I'm not going to walk you through the entire document here, but here's the introduction that we had for them. And let me go to the table of contents because I think that's helpful. So we started really looking from their buyer intelligence engagement with their target audience. Who is the target profile that they're going after? What were the findings that came out of the survey? And then what did we learn in terms of the message structure that they're going to need going forward? So it really changed their engagement. It changed the way that they present their elevator pitch. It also helped them create, as we did this for them, not only the horizontal value proposition, but also the vertical value propositions that needed to come out of this. And then we also looked at starting to create the top 5 value propositions and subsequently the next 10 and so forth. So let me go ahead and move this forward a little bit faster here. And I just want to share some of the key takeaways. So there's a lot of information that comes out of the survey, these buyer surveys that we do. And we go through the methodology that we do. We look at different audiences on demographics to see where there's a correlation analysis. But what was so interesting about this survey is that their value propositions just were off the charts. Their value propositions were very much warmly received because a lot of times your customers, your prospects, may not understand that there was a better way until you introduce it to them. What we did in the survey, though, as we looked at their questions, is we broke down their value propositions and questions into 5 different areas. Either you could help them in terms of crisis management. In other words, the company had a problem, such as a pharmaceutical company would perhaps have an issue that comes up in terms of an allergic reaction that happens with one of their drugs. And so you wanted to pick that up quickly and provide crisis management before it spread. Response time, being able to respond quickly to the target audience. Coverage, workload capacity. What we found is that most companies have a very small social media management team, and so covering all the different bases, all the different social channels is a problem for many companies, even the large ones. Another area is the social media strategy and messaging. And then finally, creating community and sense of community. So as we looked at the results of the survey, we found that we could actually start looking at the prioritization that happens in terms of their value propositions. And we could color code those value propositions based upon what their audience was saying was important to them. And again, you can see that there's a lot of information in here, but we started off with the messaging strategy, moved to the elevator pitch for the company, then moved to the value proposition at a horizontal level, and then into the top 5 value propositions. So just breaking down those 5 different areas and then looking at the horizontal value propositions, it gave us an opportunity to start breaking them down to the top 5. And let me just share with you at least one value proposition from today. So the number 1 area was around responsiveness. Their clients were said, hey, we're not equipped to manage our social media management needs for our clients on a 24/7, 365 basis. So what we wanted to do was provide how does ICUC really address this issue? What's their value proposition? So every pain, every headache needs an aspirin. And so this is the aspirin that we have here for the company. And again, we went on to value proposition 2 and so forth. This gave us a framework in terms of how to engage with their target audience going forward. And that became really useful in terms of thinking through how to engage with the target audience and how to move the messaging forward. And then that became the foundation for engagement on that buyer engagement roadmap that we talked about. And so we worked together with their team to build a series of ebooks, thought leadership documents that were important to the target audience, industry case studies, because what they were looking for is who in our industry is doing something just like me, and then solution spotlights. One of the things that we helped them create at ICUC is industry experts. So we created teams of industry experts because that's what their target audience was doing, was really looking for that industry expertise. Now, one of the key takeaways that we found with ICUC is that since their target audience wanted to hear from what was happening as far as best practices in their industry, we then proceeded to conduct mini surveys and buyer engagement with the 12 industries that were most important to them. That enabled us to really create the buyer's journey that was truly succinct and frictionless for each of their target audiences. And of course, helping them put on phenomenal webinars and engage with their target audience. So coming back to buyer intelligence, how does it change the way that you operate? Well, it moves your website from seller content, such as your products and services today, to buyer-centric messages and a buyer's journey, which is what's important to your buyer, what do they want to see from you? It also enables your sales conversations to be initiated where there is the biggest value and ROI based upon the decision makers that you're going to be talking to. From the marketing campaigns, it gives you the certainty to map out the next 12 to 24 months of what you're going to need to do to engage with your target audience. Keep in mind that 90% of the leads that you create aren't sales ready. So you're going to need a roadmap to engage with that target audience on a consistent way with the information that's important to them. It also means that you get to move to a data-driven model where your data-driven model is all based upon stats and knowledge of your buyer and really what's important to them. And finally, as we talked about, even though these buyer intelligence surveys and engagements, the objective here is really truly to understand your target audience. It proves to your stakeholders that you truly know your audience. It also does something that we find which is very interesting. I don't know about you, but I'd like to have every prospect answer 40 questions before I engage with them. So with ICUC, by having their decision makers answer 40 questions, what we found is that 50% of those decision makers that answered that survey wanted additional follow-up from ICUC. They either wanted to learn more about their services, they wanted to learn more about the company, or they wanted to really learn more about how their needs could be addressed. And so there's nothing more powerful than going back to your target audience, equipped with the information about what's important to them and what are the challenges that they have. Okay, so one last survey, if I could ask you to participate in this poll, I would really appreciate your help in this. And I'd like to always get from you, as we look at the 47 minutes that we spent together today, what's most important in terms of your takeaway? Would it be how to apply buyer intelligence to your current target audience? Perhaps apply buyer intelligence to a new audience or to a new service that you're looking at. Would it be to change your website to enable the buyer's journey? Would it be better to prioritize your campaigns based upon what the buyer wants? Or would it be to really focus on mentoring and instructing your sales team about what's important to the buyer? So go ahead if you could and participate. We really appreciate that. And we'll share the information at the end of the poll here. And like to have everybody really take the time to really give us your input. We're also going to open this up next as far as some Q&A. So we look forward to your questions that you have. So go ahead if you could. I'll just keep the poll open here for a couple more seconds. And then we'll share the information with everybody on today's webinar. Okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and close the poll and share this. Okay, 29% of you stated that applying buyer intelligence to your current target audience is most important. 14% stated that applying the buyer intelligence to new audiences would be important. And by the way, I think this is really important because if you're thinking about getting into adjacent markets or getting into uh, new areas with new solutions, I think one of the best ways you can spend your money today or invest your money is really do the intelligence before you invest heavily in terms of sales, headcount, and marketing programs. This really gives you the opportunity to understand before you invest. 43% stated that you'd like to change your website to enable the buyer's journey with this information, and that's fantastic. As you know, we've got an offering called the Sales Driven Website that we talk about. We just had a webinar on this two webinars ago, and we've got a wonderful client called Technical Toolboxes that we showed in terms of how we actually help them move their WordPress website to be a sales-driven website and really to take their target audience, allow them to self-select, and really to say, what type of engineer am I today, and take me through the guided path. Or based upon the portfolio of solutions, we allow them to have a buyer's journey based upon solutions. So that's also a great example. And then finally, 14% of you stated that you like to better prioritize your campaigns based upon what's important to your buyer. So thank you for that. Now what I'd like to do, if we could, is let's open this up for Q&A. Please go ahead and post your questions, and I'll make sure that I address as many as I can here, and appreciate your help here. Okay, so we got quite a few questions, which is great. Let's see. Okay. Let's see, the first one that we have here is from Tim. And Tim's question is, what's the right number to engage in a buyer intelligence survey? It's interesting question that you have there, Tim, because what we found is that it's really at least a minimum of 50 decision makers that you're looking for. And the reason why that's important is because you're trying to get to a critical mass to really understand what's really most important to your target audience, which is how many people do you need to count so that you think that you have a statistically relevant representation. So when you look at stats, you look at your target audience, let's say like we were doing at Intact, we would do at least a 50 or 200 CFOs in different audiences to really make sure that we pulled enough of them. So 50 is a great number. And so then I would suggest that you look at doing that and look at least 50. So that's a great way to do this. Next question is from Christine. Are there other benefits from the survey process? That's great, Christine. First of all, I would think that you'd want to engage with your buyers in this type of format probably every 2 to 3 years because they change. Your buyer changes, what you're looking at getting from your target audience changes, and so that's the frequency. The other thing that I mentioned that comes out of this process is even though it's not meant to create sophisticated and well-qualified leads for your sales team, 30 to 50% of the people that respond to this buyer intelligence survey process typically are looking for follow-up from you and from your company. So it turns into probably the most qualified leads you'll ever create other than referrals with your company. Okay, next question is from Alicia. Alicia says, how long does this process take? Good question, because if this is going to front end many of the processes we talked about for your company, we can get this done typically in about 4 to 6 weeks when we engage with our clients and help them through the process. So great question. And let's see, how many different surveys do we need to have? And this question is from Dan. Good question. I think that we don't know the answer to that, Dan, other than to say that as you think about ICUC, we found that we started with a horizontal survey of decision makers, and that it led us to the information we needed to do that on an industry basis. We also found that when we've done this horizontally with companies, that we found that sometimes we have to break it down into different personas, like we did at Intact. So we started with CFOs to controllers to accountants and users. And then another way that we find that you have to look at the number of surveys is looking at, in some cases, what's your lead solution? So if you offer a portfolio of solutions, you may start like we did with Premix Wireless with the lead solution and find out how that cascades into other solutions that are important to your client. So great questions, and thank you very much for participating in that. So let's talk about next steps. So next steps would be, for those of you joining us today, engage with us to look at one audience and say, how do we engage the buyer intelligence program here with you for a current target audience or for a new market that you're going to target before you make a lot of expensive investments, or that you're looking at advancing a new solution to market or a new service. This is a great way to do that before you invest heavily in that new market. Another way that many of our clients are looking at engaging with us today, as they're looking at the markets opening up for them, is to put together their revenue acceleration playbook. So we are doing that with a number of clients today, and it's going to be a comprehensive playbook that you want to have, including how do you really engage with your buyer in a meaningful way. Also, as I follow up with each of you, give you an opportunity to register for our next webinar, and that's going to be coming up here on April the 15th. And what we're going to talk about at the next webinar is bundling solutions. How do you bundle your solutions for profitability? How do you bundle for customer wallet share? In other words, how do you maximize the wallet share that you have with each customer? And then also, how do you bundle to minimize or reduce the amount of negotiations that happens with your prospects and buyers today? So this will be a great webinar that we'll have, and I'll have some, just like today, some excellent examples for you to attend and to take from the webinar that you can apply to your business. Okay, here's the contact information for myself and for Craig. You're welcome to call us or also look at our website, ondemandadvisors.com. And I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope that you found this really deep and meaningful in terms of getting your arms around buyer intelligence for your target audiences that you have today, and really what's the best and easiest and most direct way to engage with your buyer. So on behalf of myself, Craig, and our entire On Demand Advisors team, we'd like to thank you for your attendance, thank you for your participation, and we look forward to meaningful engagement with you today and in 2021. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.